Hello guys, and welcome to another edition of Talking Cryptozoology. I have actually two very interesting stories for you this time. One happened in August 6, 1999, and it was called the Battle Mountain, Nevada Complex Fire. It was a combination of multiple fires that had happened out during that time, and during that time that, they had a whole bunch of people actually going out there and, fighting the fire and stuff. They had a Bigfoot that actually had came out of the place during an area where one of the fires was actually being fought. And this Bigfoot came out, and I imagine it startled everybody. And it had close to 45% of its body burned. And people that were actually on site, one of the government agents that he works for, one of the agencies there, he actually gave information, and he doesn't want his name disclosed or anything like that. And they actually treated this human, and what happened was they actually moved it to an unknown, undisclosed location. That's the way the story goes. But they really get into really in-depth of how and why and what they did with this being. The next story that I have for you guys, this is another interesting story too. This actually happened after the eruption of, I believe it was Mount St Helens. It was the May 8th, 1980 when the eruption actually happened. What happens there was after the eruption happened and everything, they had to actually go back, and the way animals get really charred and burned and everything, what they had to do is they had to actually take all those dead animals and everything like that. There's no contamination there. So what they did is they went out there and they had different groupings of animals, like deer and all kinds of other animals, like whatever, bears or whatever, that they actually carried out in large containers that they flew them out by helicopter. But there were some that were unidentified. That one of the workers there that was working there had said that they were charred, and some of them there were not that much charred, but they could actually see that they had that they were not identified as any type of native species that was living there in that area where Mount St Helens was. So these two stories that I'm actually posting for you guys, you're not going to actually have to go to the post and worry about actually going to the link and stuff. What I actually did with my computer, I actually automated them like that. You can actually listen to it. So right after this, you're going to be able to hear the story yourselves. So I actually put it on MP3, and you'll be able to listen to the two full stories by themselves. It's just all these different government cover-ups and things they don't want us to know, that we really need to know these things that are going on. I guess they feel that we don't have the capacity to be able to deal with this kind of stuff. But I do believe that there would be certain people that would, try to bring harm to these beings. Yes, for the fact is that you can imagine there's a lot of us that are, wants to do this research. And the reason we want to do this research is to preserve these, humans, we want to know about these humans, how they live, and why they're there, and all the good stuff that we want to know about these humans, But there's a lot of people that would, I believe, that would, if we do bring this out, and it does get found, I really believe that, there might be bodily harm to these. I mean, look at all these other animals that are, being poached and stuff, like elephants and rhinos. I just believe that if something was to happen, that if we do find evidence, and there is evidence that is found out there, as much as we want to, preserve these beings, and we actually want to make something good come out of this. I really think that there is going to be, people out there that are going to be trying to administer bodily harm to these beings. So we really need to think about how we're going to approach this once it actually happens, and we do have significant evidence that they are really out there. Well, I actually thank everybody for your time. And if you really like this story, please subscribe to my channel. Thank you very much, and God bless.
th 2012. The following was posted at bigfootevidence.com back in July. On August 6, 1999, Battle Mountain, Nevada, exploded into several simultaneous range fires in what would be known as the Battle Mountain Complex Fire. A Bigfoot was supposedly injured in the fire, according to an anonymous government employee, who alerted the Bigfoot Field Research Organization BFRO. In a letter to BFRO dated the 7th of August 1999, Battle Mountain, Nevada, the anonymous government employee, states, "I observed an animal wounded by fire moving on all fours, not like a bear, more like ape. Firefighters captured animal, contacted local vet and medical doctor, U.S. Department of Fish and Wildlife, Department of Interior, and Bureau of Land Management on the scene. Animal tranquilized and moved to unknown location. Those at scene told not to talk about what they saw. Animal approximately 7.5 feet long / tall, human-like arms and legs, face not like man or ape but mixed between, genitalia, male, uncircumcised and human-like, hair covering most of body except chest. Chest has hair but sparse, hands with sparse hair, palms bare, with 5 digits with human opposition of thumb and 5th digit. Multiple burns. Speech attempted to communicate with caregivers once it realized they were attempting to care for it. Multiple burns on hands, feet, legs and body, some 2nd and 3rd degree burns, using rule of 9s, approximately 45% of body with burns. Doctor and vet working together providing care and moved it to unknown location locally. This notice given in violation of orders given by BLM, DOI and DF&W. Witnesses numbered in the area of 30 to 25. Word is out in the government agencies, and among the firefighters. Since an MD was called out, many thought a firefighter was injured. Please note that I am a government employee of one of the listed agencies fighting Bruce Fire in wilderness area of Nevada. Large-scale fire, approximately 70,000 acres burned and under orders not to disclose information. Protected area. I believe a cover-up is in the making. People need know. The animal needs to be kept alive and studied and released in protected area. The BFRO didn't know what to believe, and on top of that they had been unable to verify that there had been a fire in the Battle Mountain area. Tom Powell. Late Monday, August 9th, I was finally able to determine from Forest Service sources that there was most certainly a large range fire in this area of Nevada. The Battle Mountain Complex fire had extended to 180,000 acres by Monday and had 610 personnel fighting it at that time. Nothing else was heard from the witness despite email attempts to reach him. Then, some 10 days after the initial report, the witness contacted the BFRO investigator by phone. Here is parts of the report that the investigator prepared after speaking with the witness. Strict anonymity. Much to my surprise, tonight at about 9 p.m. the reporting party of the Battle Mountain incident called me. I talked with the gentleman for about 70 minutes. Although he is maintaining strict anonymity, I was able to put together a bit of a profile of the individual. This fellow, whom I will give the pseudonym RT single quote, is a male, full-time worker for a federal agency. Currently he is involved in the joint firefighting efforts in Nevada. He has extensive EMT training and experience. He says that until this incident he had seen it all in firefighting, and these days he stays mostly in the truck manning the radio. He is friendly, but not effusive. He is intelligent, likable, and fairly observant, but he isn't outstandingly articulate. He is a matter of fact, low-key, seen it all kind of character. Very tired. His regular duties may be in personnel, as he mentioned that tomorrow he would be seeing the MD involved in this incident about other matters regarding firefighting crews. It was obvious during our conversation that he was very tired. Our talk ended with Hart saying he had to get to bed to get some rest. Approximately 20 people were in the immediate vicinity of the incident. All were debriefed and informed in no uncertain terms that this incident was not to be discussed. There has not been a word about the incident at the BLM Fire HQ. He is very concerned about keeping his job, and says he would not look forward to taking a lie detector test. He created an email address exclusively for reporting this incident. Absolute privacy. Although I had originally encouraged him to call me, collect this lengthy call was on him so he could maintain absolute privacy. He is reporting the incident because he believes the information should get out. We agreed in any future communication to use the term patient to describe the Sasquatch. I'll use it here. The incident happened in the early afternoon. About 25 fighters were directly involved. The injured patient apparently wandered within sight of the fire crew, and was then surrounded. The patient seemed to know that he was captured, because he soon gave up. Marty mentioned this several times. He just gave up. The patient sat down on his buttocks, giving no evidence of a will to resist, like a dog gives up, and then you can do anything with it. Singed hair. The patient was laid out on the ground at first. His injuries were rather serious, including burns to the hands, feet, legs, and trunk, as well as much singed hair. It didn't take long for medical services to get to the scene. The attending medical team included the regular MD for the fire crews, a vet that Marty didn't recognize, and one or more paramedics. The vet was taken aback at working on a creature so human-like, and he is reported to have allowed the physician to do most of the work. At some point, Demerol and morphine were administered. The patient was placed on a spine board, which was too small. He was then placed on a regular ambulance stretcher. The sides were left down because part of the body hung over too far. The feet hung off the end. Bowel sounds. A cut down was performed to obtain an intravenous line, and fluids were administered. During the treatment of his wounds and the efforts at life support, the patient communicated with moans, groans and grumbling. Bowel sounds were heard by Marty, who was as close as 3 feet from the patient. No language-like vocalizations were heard. The patient responded to touch, specifically patting and stroking to calm him. You're not going to find an ape or a monkey responding the same way. 2 or 3 times Marty mentioned that the patient was especially responsive to a young Native American woman who started ministering to him right from the very beginning. The patient was removed from the scene in the back of a utility truck, not in an ambulance. Marty said an ambulance would have alerted townsfolk and possibly news reporters, thinking that a firefighter had been injured. No one would follow a nondescript van. The total time from initial sighting to extraction was estimated at 3 hours. Blood leaking. There was no urination, defecation, or vomit at the scene. The patient did not eat anything during that time. Serum and blood were leaking from the burned areas of the body. The area of the arm on which the cut down was performed was shaved. The hair probably fell to the ground. There was significant blood from the cut down site and from the subsequent insertion of a venous line, and some of that blood dripped to the ground. No one knows where the patient was taken. No video cameras were on the scene to film any aspect of the incident. The fire commander was present. He had a camera, and he did record what he saw. The patient is described as being about 7 feet tall, give or take a few inches. Marty does not give a weight estimate. Equine odor. Most of the body is covered by brownish hair about 2 inches in length. No gray hairs are evident. There are no mats noted on the coat. There is an odor about the patient. It is not an especially obnoxious odor. Marty calls it a natural odor, but he had a hard time describing it. He said it is similar to a strong equine odor. The head is not sloped. The forehead is heavy boned. The lips large, but human-like. The ears human-like and tied to the head, with the earlobe attached, not dangling. The patient is strong-jawed. He could not remember the color of the eyes, but thought they might be brown. The head is about 2 times the size of a human head. There is hair on the face, but not on the palms as soles of the feet. Great bulk. There is great bulk to the patient, but there is no fat. He said Hoss observations of the form of the body did not match with that film with the one running into the woods, and he called that film a probable hoax. The hands are about 1.5 times a human hand, 5 fingers with opposable thumb. The fingernails are thicker and heavier, and one was chipped. The feet are large, 5 ties on each foot. No evidence of fractures, injuries, arthritis, or deformation. The sexual features are those of an uncircumcised male, matching the human anatomy. Marty made the comment several times that these are not monkey or ape features. He felt he was in the presence of a very human creature. Access to the area. I have asked him to return to the scene and search for the hair from the shaved arm, or even the blood that dripped on the ground. He said he has access to the area, but probably won't be able to return until after the fires are controlled. In response to Doug's plea that someone return to the site and search for blood and hair evidence, Marty reported back to him on the 26th of September, "Dozer has torn up the area, nothing left. Word is there is still life, location unknown, believe within couple 100 miles." Later, Marty, Tom Powell, Doug concluded that the Dozer work seemed a bit too convenient and was likely a cover story concocted by Marty to explain away his inability to recover any physical evidence. Doug strongly suspected that the whole matter was a hoax on this basis, and that is where the situation pretty much ended. Precise detail. But Tom Powell couldn't leave the case that easily and further on continues. "It is my feeling that this person Marty was not lying, and this set of described events really happened. There is simply too much precise detail and a complete absence of error or contradiction." The report was dismissed as a probable hoax and never posted for public inspection at the BFRO website, where it might have been seen by someone else who was present at the time and who might have contacted BFRO to confirm or deny the account. 3 years after the event, Tom Powell dug up the old files on the Battle Mountain matter and decided to try and send Marty an email message and see what happened. Less than 24 hours later, he was surprised to receive this reply. "Not disclosed. Tom, I had almost forgotten about the event until now. Have not spoken due to the classification that was put on it. The patient was taken to a university or some hospital that was not disclosed. As for verification, well, other than my contact with you, I know of no one other than those there on the scene. An affidavit was signed under Department of Interior and U.S. Forest Services. 1. Confidential under penalty of felony arrest and jail time. 2. Immediate loss of government service rank, loss of retirement, and benefits. Several meetings were held in reference to him. I do respect his rights of life and will always be a believer of their existence beyond any shadow of a doubt, as seen with my own eyes, smelled with my own nose, and heard with my own ears. Native man. His image is still visible as it was then. No monster, no animal, but a lineage of native man. His trust in us to take care of him and recognize him that harm was not meant when contact was made. Knowing that care would be given to him, I am sure that Department of Interior knows where he may have been released. What more can I say? Specifics, features, anatomy. Well, stand in front of the mirror and think of man's evolution. There's more posted at the above link in it. Bigfoot recovered, injured in forest fire. Is the count anyway related to the supposed bodies found after the Mt. St. Helens eruption? At one of Ray Crow's Western Bigfoot meetings, someone brought up the topic of corpses of Sasquatch after the May 18, 1980 eruption of Mt. St. Helens in Washington state. The witness heard of 2 Sasquatch the Army Corps of Engineers had taken out of the volcanic devastation, 2 months after the initial blast. Terry Reams heard of a dredging operation of the Cowlitz River and 2 bodies were found in the sand, probably same case. A chopper flew them off. Joe Bilart offered that the crane doing the dredging was from the Manitowoc Company and that the bodies were found 2 weeks after the Mt. St. Helens blast of May 18, 1980. He suggested that somebody might want to track down the company and find out who was working the shift that the bodies had been found on. During a tour of the devastation by helicopter in 1985, the Viet veteran helo pilot mentioned a similar tale to Bobby Short, saying there were military helos that coppered out nets full of burned and semi-burned elk, deer, bear and something with hairy charred arms hanging out of the drop nets. They were taken to a common pit where the bodies were burned to avoid disease and contamination of the rivers. Then there is a report submitted to the BFRO. Fred Bradshaw report concerning dead Bigfoot bodies near Mt. St. Helens. My father worked for Warehorse Co. at Green Mountain, WA, east of Vancouver. The site has security on the roads to check on the equipment and check closed areas to keep people out. My father was working the day Mt. St. Helens blew up. He was at a meeting in Kelso, WA, and as he was a supervisor, when Mt. St. Helens blew its side out, all heck cut loose. My father was sent back to Green Mountain right away, but like most he wasn't allowed to go very far because of the mudslide coming down the river. He did get to the town of Toutla, WA, on Highway 504 off I-5. He and his crew were placed at different spots to watch mud flow and of course help people get out of the blast zone after the major blow-up. He was sent to the area of Spirit Lake to keep people out. When the second major blow-up of the mountain came, my father and other guy with him reported in, and they got out of the. He was then placed in charge of the helicopter landing zone. It was his job to help keep people out of the landing zone and let aid crews in so they could care for injured. Later, when all the people were out and bodies out, the National Guard was brought in to clean up. They hauled dead animals out that they placed in piles, deer in one, elk in another and so on. They were covered up with tarps and later burned. But my father was placed in charge of one pile of dead that were covered and no one was allowed to go near. Armed U.S. National Guard personnel were around this pile, and one day when they were going to move this group of bodies, and my father was very close to it and was told to keep his mouth closed, and when the tarps were removed he saw the creatures, some badly burned and some not. They placed them in a net and lifted them into a truck and covered it over. My father asked a guardsman what will they do with them and he said study them or whatever. He didn't want to know. He said it's like other things you don't ask, and off they went, and no one knows what happened to them. My father and the rest were debriefed and sent home. After the post on BigfootEvidence.com, a comment was posted. I was reading some of the stories about Mount St Helens on the message boards and wanted to share this one. I only ask that you withhold my name. I was a National Guardsman at the Mount St Helens site and this is the first time I have ever spoken about what I saw firsthand. I lived in Spokane, Washington and was 24 at the time this all took place. I have read some of the other stories and they only tell part of the story. I was placed on a special cleanup crew farther up the mountain. A large tent was set up and it was guarded by armed soldiers who were not part of the guard. There were numerous soldiers on the scene that were not members of the guard. We were given a briefing by a soldier who said that after he spoke to us, we would forget about him and what he said at the end of the mission. This was strange as we never dealt with anything before. Myself and 4 other guardsmen were told to follow a group of soldiers and not to speak to each other and to remain very quiet overall. We were told to get into a jeep and wait. We sat in the jeep for maybe a half hour. Eventually another jeep arrived carrying a civilian and another member of the military. The civilian was brought into the tent and he emerged a few minutes later followed by a large hairy creature. It looked like a large man covered in fur and the best way to describe it was like Beast from X-Men only brown. The creature looked to have some burns and had a bandage on its arm. At first we were afraid but when it walked by we could see its eyes and it just looked very sad and somber. He climbed into the back of a pickup with the civilian and the two were speaking in a weird language I had never heard. It would cough at times. We followed the truck to different areas. There were 5 total stops. Each time we stopped we were told to follow the civilian and the creature. Each time we followed them to rocky areas where there were caves. The creature would make a sound and then listen. At the first area he made a sound and we all just waited in silence. After a few minutes, the creature looked at the civilian and then at the ground. The civilian at one point touched its shoulder and called for a canteen to give the creature a drink. The same thing happened at the next area but this time there was a response to the sound. After a few minutes 2 soldiers emerged from the cave carrying a badly burned creature just like the one with the civilian. The creature bent down next to it and looked it over for about 5 minutes. It then spoke softly with the civilian. It turned and walked back to the truck and we were told to follow. As we were walking away we heard a shot and we knew it was one of the soldiers putting the creature out of its misery. There was no response at the 3rd or 4th site but at the 5th there was another return sound to the creature. This time it was different and soldiers carried out a creature with a badly burned left leg. We were then ordered to all help get a very large stretcher from the truck and to help place the creature on it and carry it back to the truck. We then immediately returned to the base camp. The creature was carried into the tent while the other creature and the civilian spoke. We were ordered to stay in the jeep until we were to be debriefed. As the creature turned to walk into the tent it looked at us and made a waving gesture with its hand. We took it as a thank you for what we had done. By the time we were ordered out of the jeep we were all in shock. We were called over to an area to be debriefed and it was just strange. I will never forget what was said because it was just not what was expected. I thought I would hear you took an oath and now you need to live up to it for your country with the threat also implied. A different high-ranking soldier just said look, do you all really want an explanation? You saw what we were doing. These creatures live in these areas. They mean no harm and want to be left alone. Do you really want to do anything that may cause them trouble? They're like us in a lot of ways. If you need or want to talk about this just wait about 30 years. By that time there will likely be no reason to keep them a secret. We were then ordered back to the guard camp because they were breaking it up so nobody saw too much and knew everything that happened. We did not speak of it and after a few months I just took the attitude that these things live out there and honestly my life is no different because of it. I only bring it up now because people have been writing a lot about Mount St Helens and I believe that the whole story should be told. I will also say this, I like to camp and hike and have done so many times throughout the Northwest. Every time I would look for signs of these creatures, tracks, listen for sounds etc. I never saw or heard anything other than what I did that day on Mount St Helens. Then later, the following comment was posted unedited. I don't know who wrote this story or if they were the but I can add this much and I will give you facts you can check up on, if you feel this is a hoax. But I was an airman in the Air Force in 1980. I was stationed at George AFB from the late 70s to the early 80s. Our mission was the Wild Weasels Air Force 2nds that would go into a war area before it started, like the first Gulf War, at low level and pop up and then light up the ground to air defenses and then shoot anti-radiation missiles at the sites, letting the other aircraft get it. In 1980 we were shipped to train with the Canadian Forces at Camex CFB on Vancouver Island. We took a C-141 from George to Canada. Our C-141 had an in-flight emergency and had to land at Travis Air Force Base in Northern California for repair. We were losing hydraulic fluid in one engine and I saw the crewman come back and dump several cans of hydraulic fluid into the reservoir and it just went back to zero. He had a parachute and we detained. Kind of made me nervous, but we later got back on our way and flew over St Helens right after it blew its top. Once we got to Camex, our officer in charge told us we would be there for longer than the 2-week TDY due to an emergency mission that they needed help on. We were all specialized airmen trained in different specialties in aircraft maintenance and repair, but we were soldiers first and we did lots of other stuff that our country needed. We were there for a couple days not doing anything because as I look back they were trying to figure out how to use us. Then we all got on a bus and were bused to the area around the south end of the island and were picked up on a strange naval ferry. I was never in the Navy so I don't know anything about boats, but our bus was tied down and delivered to US side and we drove off. It was under darkness and it was typically cloudy and raining and we continued our bus ride to the disaster area. We were given M16 seconds and 1 mag, which I found fascinating because most Air Force enlisted troops shoot a gun in basic and you may never see a M16 again. We were also given ill-fitting green helmets marked guard, ill-fitting plain green abdafs and told to follow orders we were to be given in the upcoming briefing. In the briefing we were told we would be guards to special areas and told to check credentials and to only allow people in who had the correct credentials into the military tent areas that were set up what looked to be like the perimeter of the area affected by the eruption. We had no idea where we were at. There were no towns or cities around where we were at and we arrived there. We were about 30 airmen completely and totally confused on what was going on. We slept in a tented area that was near where we worked. We had a mess tent next to the tent where we slept and we didn't leave that area about an acre size for a week or more. Most of us, if not all of us, were guarding areas that people moved into and out of with what looked like victims. The tents we guarded had a foyer area and we couldn't see what was behind the second door. It was brightly lit and you had to go through a couple of partitions to get to the main area of the tent. I assume they were there to prevent peeping into the tents by the guards. It was very infrequent that anyone walk in or out, and we worked 12-hour shifts only at night. We were used to working 12-hour shifts because this was just after the Iranian crisis and we would go on alert every 3 weeks, work 12-hour shifts flying as many missions as we could, then have a day off, then another alert and 3 more weeks of 12-hour shifts for 3 more weeks. We were told that if anyone tried to breach our area to shoot. That never happened or came close to happening. This was funny to me because we were given 1 magazine and I don't know if the bullets were real or not. We were Air Force, not Marines. I knew more about a 5-iron than a M16, but nothing ever came up. The only time anyone came up to the area I was guarding only happened after midnight, and it looked to me like a doctor in a white lab coat with either a patient or victim who was wrapped in what looked like overcoats and our night shift navy blue ski caps. You could never see the person who was led into or out of the tents because they had their hands in the coats and were led into the tent by the arm. I think I was there for 8 to 9 days and it was the most unusual thing I had ever experienced in the Air Force. Last part, out of those nights on guard I noticed 2 out of the people that were escorted in were very tall. That's the only thing I noticed were those 2 tall people. I was not in a position to see how tall they were, but it was obvious they were over a whole head higher than the doctor, if that's what they were. Only the escort talked and they only mentioned the last name and showed the badge. I don't know if they were Army or civilian. The other thing I noticed was the escorted people were really wide, but I always assumed until now that it was the coats they were wearing. It was very nippy and I also assumed we were at some kind of altitude. After that we were given a debrief that we had helped a lot of the people who were victims of the eruption. That's all we were told, victims, and told that we were not to mention this part of our TDY. After our last shift, and I don't know how long that was, but it was longer than a week, we were allowed to sleep. Then the next evening we were allowed to shower. We were only allowed skin baths with washcloths till then in another tent that was behind the latrine tent and chow tent, given back our original Air Force uniforms and put back on the same bus we rode in and bussed back to the same area under darkness, ferried back to Vancouver Island and back to Camex CFB, and we continued our TDY as if nothing happened. We did 2 more weeks of flying sorties with the Canadians, played and drank a ton of Canadian beer, Lablats Blue, and flew in our C-141 back to George AFB. It was all a big mystery on what happened then till I read this story, but it seems similar. But they must have really been short on personnel to use a bunch of Air Force kids as guards. They thought nothing would ever happen, but that's the only time I ever pulled guard duty outside of basic training at San Antonio. After I had posted Omar the Boss of the Woods single quote. In November 2008, I received an email from a man in southern Washington who stated that he had heard anecdotes from Yakima Native people in reference Omar as Sasquatch after the Mt. St. Helens eruption. The most prominent account was that of a large male Omar that was badly burned, but still alive, that took refuge in an area east of the devastation near traditional tribal lands. He was told that government agents in military gear captured the Omar and airlifted it to an undisclosed location. I have no way of knowing if this is a true account, but it does seem to suggest that there was an effort made to take advantage of the eruption in order to capture specimens either dead or alive. There's something in the woods. Strange secrets, real government files on the unknown. Bigfoot, the true story of apes in America. Bigfoot Declassified, the official government manual for coexisting with the now documented species.